Like, I've always been quite grade oriented, as in I care about that part of progression. I don't necessarily hold myself like very strict to I should be able to climb a grade or do this or that, but something within my style I can always track a grade progression with. Like if I feel a boulder suits me, I can always track the progression there. But then again, like with a slab, for instance, I'm not the best at slab climbing, and whenever I progress slightly at a V7 slab, I'm still really psyched because it's just like, oh, I'm learning some foot tricks. But if it is within my style, like Story of Two Worlds, for instance, which I did, or the Big Island, where I feel pretty comfortable on the holds, and like there's nothing distinct that's like, oh, this I shouldn't be able to do, I can track a sort of grade progression within that framework. With goals and grades, we set them very arbitrarily. Like the goal grade that you have is an arbitrary kind of, like, first off, as mentioned, grades are arbitrary, and then you set that arbitrary goal for yourself. And then with that, you can also put a certain arbitrary value to it. So you can define for yourself, like, how much do I care about this climb or grade or whatever? Like, how much does it mean to me? And when you take control of that, you can also like minimize it when it's not necessary. So when it's hurting you or not helping you, that goal, that the caring about the goal. So when you acknowledge that it's like, oh, it's just a random goal I set up for myself for the heck of it. And when I started taking control of that, I could also stop caring when it didn't go as I wanted it to, which has helped me a lot with those struggles and with that like frustration that arises from chasing like that progression, that next level, that wanting to be better.
Right.
Because if you're just allowing it to just be this like something you should be able to achieve, that next level all the time, and you should be progressing towards it, and you feel you're not, then it's going to be a bad thing. But if you take more control of it and the value you put to it, then yeah, it can probably help a lot of people to just be in a better mindset more consistently.
So rather than identify a grade goal, and I like, by the way, that you also acknowledged that you are motivated by grades. And I think that there's been quite a bit of talk through the climbing community of, it should never be about the grades. It should only be about the process and this kind of thing. But look, some people are motivated by grades. I've identified a grade that I want to climb this fall. I want to climb my first 13A. And I identified that before I identified the route, which maybe is a little bit backwards, like what you're saying there. So maybe even a better way than to just grab a grade out of thin air and say, I want to achieve this thing, is to maybe grab a route that you like, a problem that you like, that is of a grade that you want to achieve. And now that becomes the objective, and it's far more specific and far more tangible than just like this kind of arbitrary grade that what does it even mean?
No, it's very true. And I think because I think a lot of people kind of dream about like, oh, one day I want to climb V9, V11, V15, whatever.
Sure.
And I mean, to a degree I have as well. Definitely. I mean, when I started working towards climbing V15, I even made a series about that on my channel and everything. And through that process, I've also learned that like you said, a lot of people say you should care about the process. And I do think like that's definitely something I started appreciating more. But I don't think caring about the process is necessarily for everyone. Like some people want to have a goal to achieve. And I think a grade can help with that goal.
All right, y'all, just a quick 30-second shout out here for today's sponsor, which is the Crimped app. And I'm telling you, I love Crimped. Long before there was a YouTube channel, I was using Crimped to program my training because it takes the guesswork out of things. We're too busy to worry about this stuff. Open up Crimped. You can either load in a program like a sport plan or a boulder plan, or you can choose from the hundreds of exercises and protocols that they have in there to figure out your week. And at the end of each day and at the end of each week, you get to check them off. You know what's happening. You know what's coming. It will level up your training. I love it so much. Check it out. Hit that link. You can download it for free. All right, let's get back to the interview.
I don't think it's good to chase grades necessarily. And I don't think it's like that's the main focus. But I think chasing progression, I think, is pretty good for a lot of people. For me, it's been a cornerstone to my climbing. Really caring about becoming like a little bit better, learning new things. And that's within the entire framework of climbing. So as I mentioned earlier, caring about a V7 slab and a crimpy V11 that just doesn't suit me because it has small edges, like something like that, just really, like, if you care about that part of it, grades also becomes a part of the equation, because that is the metric we use. But then you have to, of course, orient your way around the grades and figure out like what is a grade for you, what is the scale for me. And you'll notice that the grading scale is I mean, in Europe, I would say it's like set up by dudes 175 centimeters. Like that's the average kind of. And like grades are based off of that in general. And then there's a massive, curve of how other people will experience it. But if that's your frame of reference, you have to be exactly like everyone else kind of who started establishing all of these boulders and routes. And the point being that they are going to be inconsistent for everyone, because it's like, it depends so much on who started establishing the area and and everything. So grades are absolutely arbitrary, but then you can kind of start tracking them for yourself and figure out like the style that you're in and the grade progression you have within that style. And I've worked a lot with that and figuring out how to orient myself around that, and it helps my mental game on any project that I have.
I really like that. I love that perspective on grades, because again, we can use them to motivate, but maybe not to pin all of our self-worth and accomplishment and validation on, because at the end of the day, to your point, it's quite subjective. They are, by definition, very subjective. Now, you mentioned there was a process or a time period for you where you maybe hit a little bit of a breaking point in how emotional your climbing was making you. I'd love to hear a little bit about that, and then maybe kind of what happened subsequently.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So this was like the first time I started encountering my emotions as a climber, like properly. Because I was at this boulder, and this was many years ago, and I started, it was an 8A roof in Font, and I fell off the last move, which is like a 5+ move, so many times in a row. And, it was maybe 15, 20 moves for the entire thing. So falling there was so frustrating. Yeah. And I just got angrier and angrier. And after a while, I kicked my chalk bag so far that, all the chalk fell away. And I was just really annoying and just a bad person. Like not really the kind of climber I want to be. And this was a turning point for me. So for several months after this, I just flipped, and I kind of like became completely ambivalent towards so many things in climbing, like how sessions were going. I was still a bit emotional back and forth, I guess, but very, very numb overall. And that hurt my climbing more, actually. So I started getting worse and worse and worse. I felt the progression I'd had was starting to dip instead of keep on growing.
Like you were too chill? Like you went from being very emotional to like almost a lack of emotion?
Yeah. Very much a lack of emotion, which had the effect that, all climbing sessions were okay, but none of them were great. And any top out that I did was nice, but didn't really matter. And so it was kind of like this thing where it's like, well, do I really want to be this climber then? I mean, I'm a lot more chill, but it's not as fun to climb anymore. And I'll definitely not keep on doing it if this is everything I feel. Then it's more like regular exercise, like anything else, basically. And I started just really processing this a lot and thinking about like, well, how do I want to approach climbing? What is it for me? What does it mean for me? Why do I want to climb at all? And I did realize like that kind of fire and anger that made me kick away the chalk bag is also one of the things that made me so psyched on climbing and made me want to train harder and just keep on doing it. And so I kind of picked up that torch again. But as we talked about it a little bit earlier, I've worked on balancing that a lot. So I never try to let that like frustration or anger take over, and instead always try and keep, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still get frustrated when things aren't going my way, but just not to the same extent that I did back then. And I try and always like balance these two out so that I'm not, neither too psyched nor too non-psyched either. I always try and be happy when I climb something,